The Warlords had crushed every species that dared to defy them. Across the Orion Arm, their empire spanned 1,000 conquered worlds, each bent to their will through fire and fear. No one challenged them. No one had the strength. Until now, Commander Jack Riker knelt in the center of the Warlords' Grand Hall, his hands bound behind his back, muscles tense but expression unreadable. He had been dragged through miles of metal corridors, past sneering alien guards and towering banners of conquest, to stand before the Overlord himself. The chamber was vast, lined with jagged black stone, illuminated by the cold, crimson glow of hovering energy orbs. Around him, alien generals and warriors loomed, their various species grotesque yet imposing. Hulking brutes with plated skin, slender creatures with razor-sharp limbs, all clad in the armor of an empire that had never known defeat. Seated on a throne of obsidian and bone was Overlord Krogan, the master of them all. Twice the size of a man, his body was a fusion of raw muscle and chitinous plating, his 4 burning eyes fixed on the human before him. The air around him seemed to crackle with suppressed energy. He leaned forward, clawed fingers tapping against the armrest. "You are the first of your kind to be captured alive," Krogan mused, his voice a deep, resonant growl. "Humanity, a fledgling species, barely worthy of notice. Yet you alone crippled an entire warband before being subdued." Riker's lip curled, his voice even. "You send amateurs, you get casualties." Laughter rippled through the assembled warlords, guttural and cruel. Krogan's mandibles twitched in something akin to amusement. He rose from his throne, stepping forward, towering over the human. "I admire your defiance," Krogan said, voice softer now, almost intrigued. "Most creatures beg when they stand where you do. They weep for mercy. But not you." He tilted his head. "Tell me, human, are you truly fearless, or merely too foolish to grasp your situation?" Riker met his gaze without hesitation. "You think fear is what keeps men alive." He exhaled slowly. "Fear makes men hesitate, and hesitation gets them killed." The amusement in Krogan's eyes flickered, replaced with something colder. "Then you will have no complaints about a test." A massive set of doors groaned open at the far end of the chamber. A wave of heat rolled through the hall, thick with the scent of scorched metal and blood. Riker's head turned slightly, taking in the arena beyond, an enclosed pit lined with jagged walls, the floor stained from countless battles. Spectators filled the seats above, a roaring sea of alien warriors eager for carnage. Krogan gestured lazily toward the pit. "Survive, and I will consider sparing your home world." The warlords chuckled, already convinced of the outcome. Riker said nothing. His expression didn't change, but something in his stance shifted, a quiet readiness, like a coiled spring. 2 guards unshackled him and shoved him forward. He stepped into the pit without a word. The moment his boots touched the ground, the gates opposite him slammed open. 3 warriors emerged, towering monstrosities bred for war. Each was twice his size, their bodies layered in thick armor plates, their eyes burning with hunger. One wielded a serrated blade as long as Riker was tall. Another held a massive flail dripping with energy, while the third flexed razor-sharp claws, preferring to kill with his own hands. Riker rolled his shoulders, testing his range of motion. His only weapon was a single combat knife. Standard issue, 7 inches of reinforced alloy. It would have to be enough. The first warrior charged, the ground trembling under its weight. Riker waited, calm, watching for the opening. At the last second, he sidestepped, blade flashing upward. The creature roared as steel met flesh, Riker's knife driving deep into an unarmored gap between its ribs. He twisted the handle and wrenched the blade free, pivoting just as the second attacker swung its flail. The impact missed him by inches, striking the ground with enough force to crack stone. Riker moved fast. He closed the distance before the creature could recover, driving the blade into the soft flesh beneath its jaw. Blood sprayed, the body convulsing before collapsing. The crowd's jeers faltered. The third warrior hesitated for a fraction of a second. That was all Riker needed. He lunged, using the dying body as a springboard, launching himself onto the final enemy's back. His knife flashed again, carving a deep line across its throat. It staggered, clawing at its own wound, choking on its own blood. Riker rode it down to the ground as it fell, yanking the blade free as the life faded from its eyes. The arena fell silent. Slowly, Riker stood, covered in the blood of his enemies. He turned, knife still in hand, and looked up at Krogan. The Overlord did not speak for a long time. Then, finally, he let out a slow, deliberate exhale. Interesting. A new ripple went through the assembled warlords. Not laughter this time, but something else. Uncertainty. Krogan's gaze lingered on Riker, measuring him, weighing something unseen. Then, with a flick of his hand, he signaled the guards. Take him to the holding cells. He may yet prove useful. Riker allowed himself a small, satisfied smirk. He had their attention, and that was all he needed. The cell was dimly lit, the walls lined with a strange metallic alloy that hummed faintly, as if the entire structure was alive. Riker sat against the cold surface, muscles aching, but his mind was sharp, processing every detail. He was alive, which meant Krogan saw value in him. That was a mistake. Across the room, two other figures stirred, their forms barely visible in the faint red glow of the security lights. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with a shaved head and a scar running down his temple, lifted his head. His voice was rough, edged with suspicion. "Who the hell are you?" "Jack Riker, Commander, United States Navy." He watched their reactions carefully. The scarred man nodded slowly, recognition flickering behind tired eyes. "Sergeant Elias Voss, Marines, and that's Carter, former Black Ops." He gestured toward the third prisoner, a lean, wiry man with sharp features and a calculating gaze. Carter said nothing, only offered a small nod. Riker glanced at the reinforced door, then back at them. "How long have you been here?" "Too damn long," Voss muttered. "They're preparing for something big. We overheard the guards talking. Earth is in their sights." Riker exhaled, the weight of it pressing down. He had suspected as much, but confirmation only sharpened his resolve. "Then we don't have time to sit around." Carter spoke for the first time, his voice smooth and measured. "You got a plan?" Riker smirked. "I always have a plan." He had been studying the guards since they tossed him in here, noting their rotations, the way their weapons were holstered, the brief lapse in security every time the shift changed. He detailed everything quickly, his words clipped, efficient. Voss and Carter listened, absorbing every detail. When he finished, Voss cracked his knuckles. "Damn good to have a SEAL in here." Footsteps echoed down the hall. The moment had come. As the door slid open, two guards stepped in, their weapons slung lazily at their sides. They expected prisoners too broken to resist. They expected fear. They got Riker. He moved in an instant, surging forward with explosive speed. His elbow slammed into the first guard's throat, crushing its windpipe before it could react. He pivoted, twisting the alien's weapon from its grasp, and firing a controlled burst into the second guard's skull. The body crumpled. Voss and Carter were already moving, seizing weapons, securing the entrance. Carter crouched by the fallen guards, quickly stripping a small comm device from one of their belts. "We're gonna need these," he muttered. Riker checked the hallway. Clear for now? They slipped out, moving like ghosts, keeping to the shadows, every step measured. Alarms hadn't sounded yet, but it was only a matter of time. The facility was massive, an intricate maze of corridors and towering security checkpoints. But Riker had studied the guards, their routines, their weaknesses. He led them through an auxiliary passage, bypassing the main security nodes. Along the way, they took out lone patrols with ruthless efficiency, securing more weapons and gear. They reached the armory. The door was sealed with biometric lock, its interface pulsing with alien script. Carter knelt beside the panel, his fingers moving with practiced precision as he worked to override the system. Voss kept watch, gripping his stolen rifle. This better be quick. Carter exhaled through his nose. Fast costs extra. The lock released with a soft hiss. They slipped inside, greeted by racks of advanced weaponry. Plasma rifles, energy grenades, close combat blades designed for creatures twice their size. Riker grabbed a sidearm, testing the weight before strapping it to his thigh. "Load up," We hit the main reactor next. Voss grinned. Now we're talking. With their new arsenal, they moved swiftly through the base, planting explosives at key structural points. Every action was deliberate, methodical. They weren't just escaping, they were sending a message. The first alarm blared just as they reached the reactor chamber. Heavy boots thundered through the corridors as Warlord enforcers converged. The room was vast, a towering core pulsing with raw energy. The air was thick with heat, every breath searing. Riker and his team took defensive positions. The first wave of guards rushed in, weapons raised. Plasma fire filled the air, scorching metal, shattering consoles. Riker moved like a phantom, weaving between cover, dropping enemies with surgical precision. Voss roared as he fired, his rifle cutting down advancing forces. Carter, ever precise, laid down suppressive fire, his shots never wasted. But they were outnumbered. Riker saw the control panel near the reactor core. He sprinted for it, sliding across the heated floor as bolts of energy missed him by inches. His fingers flew over the unfamiliar interface, bypassing safeties, overloading the system. A deep rumble shook the facility. Warning sirens wailed. The reactor's glow intensified, flickering wildly. We need to move now. They fell back, cutting through waves of reinforcements as the base descended into chaos. Explosions erupted behind them, the floor trembling with each detonation. The Warlords' forces scrambled, unsure whether to chase them or contain the disaster. As they neared the hangar, a squad of elite guards blocked their path, heavily armored, better trained. The fight was brutal, close quarters, and merciless. Voss took a hit to the shoulder, but powered through, his blade finding soft flesh beneath the enemy's plating. Carter fought with cold precision, his strikes lethal, unerring. Riker faced the last of them alone, a towering brute wielding a massive energy axe. The Warlord swung, the weapon carving to the air with deadly force. Riker ducked, rolled, came up with his blade. He drove it deep into the alien's exposed throat, twisting hard. The body shuddered, then fell still. The hangar doors loomed ahead, their escape within reach. A sleek alien craft sat waiting, its engines humming, prepped for departure. Riker didn't stop to question their luck. Either someone left it ready, or someone expected them to fail. Either way, it was theirs now. They stormed aboard, Carter diving into the cockpit, fingers flying over controls. Hold on to something. The ship lurched, then shot forward as the bay doors sealed behind them. Through the viewport, the facility burned, explosions ripping through its core. Krogan's empire had never known true defiance. Until now, Riker exhaled, gripping the edge of a console as the stars stretched before them. This was just the beginning. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, a vast abyss of silence broken only by the hum of the stolen Warlord ship. Riker sat in the co-pilot seat, eyes locked on the distant blue-green sphere, growing larger by the second. Earth, untouched, unprepared. He exhaled, forcing his thoughts into order. Carter's fingers danced over controls, guiding the craft through the outer defenses without triggering alarms. We're clear. No Warlord signals in the system. But that won't last. Voss leaned back against the bulkhead, rolling his injured shoulder. They're coming. Question is, does Earth have a prayer stopping them? Riker didn't answer immediately. He was already mapping out the answer in his mind. The Warlords weren't just coming to conquer. They were coming to erase resistance before it could take root. Standard tactics. Hit hard, demoralize, and still fear. They relied on their reputation, the unshakable certainty that no species could resist them. That belief was their weakness. The ship touched down at a remote Terran defense outpost, deep in the Arctic. No cities, no civilians, just hardened military personnel, willing to ask questions later. The second the ramp lowered, armed soldiers swarmed in, rifles raised, orders barked. Riker stepped forward, hands raised but eyes locked onto the commanding officer, a grizzled man with silver at his temples and suspicion in his stare. Commander Riker, United States Navy. We need to talk. Within minutes, they were inside a war room, surrounded by high-ranking officers, satellite feeds, and tense silence. A holographic projection displayed the Warlord fleet, still distant but moving with grim inevitability. They had days. At most. They don't just outgun us, one of the officers said, arms crossed. They outnumber us 100 to 1. We won't survive a direct assault. Then we don't give them one, Riker said. His voice was calm, measured, carrying the weight of certainty. We don't fight on their terms. We break them before they ever touch the ground. He stepped toward the hologram, tapping the display to highlight the Warlord fleet's formation. They expect fear. That's how they win before the battle even starts. But fear works both ways. Carter leaned in, a smirk playing at the edge of his lips. You're talking psychological warfare. Damn right, Riker said. We make them think Earth has something they can't counter. A weapon, a force, a threat so unknown they hesitate. They second guess. And when they do, we hit them where it hurts. The officers exchanged glances, some skeptical, some intrigued. Voss grunted. How? Riker's mind was already moving ahead. We hijacked their communications. We leaked misinformation. They think they're walking into an easy fight. We let them think we've cracked their technology, that we have ships with capabilities beyond their understanding. He looked at Carter. Can you make that happen? Carter cracked his knuckles. Give me a terminal in a few hours. It wasn't just deception, it was misdirection. As Carter worked, they fed carefully crafted transmissions into the Warlord networks, letting intercepted messages paint a picture of a Terran defense fleet that didn't exist. Stealth weapons capable of phasing through armor, shields that repelled energy-based attacks. A strike force trained to kill warlords in their sleep. The enemy listened. They always did. But misinformation alone wouldn't be enough. Riker knew they had to back it with real action. He led a strike team on a captured warlord vessel, slipping behind enemy lines and launching precision raids on their supply ships. Every attack was fast, brutal, leaving behind no survivors, only carnage and confusion. He made sure to leave warlord insignias to face, bodies displayed in ways that sent a clear message. Earth wasn't prey. The first signs of hesitation rippled through the enemy ranks. Scouts delayed their approach. Warlord commanders sent conflicting orders, some demanding full-speed invasion, others urging caution. Riker could feel it, the first seeds of doubt. Then the Warlords sent their vanguard, not the full force, but a testing strike. A dozen warships entered Earth orbit, their weapons primed to turn cities into ash. They never got the chance. As the first warship descended, a hidden Terran missile battery locked on, launching a payload of experimental warheads directly into the heart of its propulsion systems. The explosion ripped through its hull, sending debris spiraling into the atmosphere. Two more ships followed, only to be ambushed by Earth stealth fighters, emerging from the clouds like ghosts before tearing into their exposed flanks. The remaining warships hesitated just long enough for Riker's sabotage teams, embedded on their hulls, to detonate pre-planted charges. The fleet shattered before it ever touched the ground. The survivors fled, not because they couldn't fight, but because for the first time, they didn't know what they were fighting. From orbit, the remaining warlord commanders watched their vanguard crumble. They had never lost a battle before it began. Now, faced with an enemy that refused to play by the rules, they hesitated. In the war room, the officers stared at the tactical readouts, barely believing what they saw. Riker stood unmoving, eyes locked on the enemy fleet, still holding position beyond the moon's shadow. They're scared, Carter murmured, watching the scrambled warlord transmissions. They don't know what's real anymore. Voss let out a short laugh. That makes two of us. Riker exhaled, but there was no satisfaction in his expression. They'll come back, in full force. The room fell silent. They had bought time, but the war was far from over. The warlords would adapt, and when they did, hesitation would be replaced with fury. Riker turned from the hologram, his mind already pushing forward. Then we make sure they never get the chance. The warlord fleet emerged from the void, blotting out the stars with its sheer size. Hundreds of warships, their hulls glistening with the scars of past conquests, assembled into a formation that had broken civilizations before. Earth deception had bought time, but time was running out. Krogan would not hesitate again. Riker stood on the bridge of the captured Warlord dreadnought, now repurposed as a command vessel for Earth's final stand. Below, the planet's defenses were primed, every remaining missile battery, railgun, and fighter squadron locked onto the incoming fleet. He clenched his fists, watching the enemy form up. This was it. Carter's voice crackled over the comms. They're broadcasting a message, patching it through now. The screen flickered to life, and Krogan's monstrous visage filled the display. His 4 burning eyes radiated fury, but beneath the anger, Riker saw something more. Caution, doubt. The cracks in his confidence were there, faint but real. Human, Krogan rumbled, his deep voice vibrating through the ship's systems. You believe your tricks and shadows have made you strong. You believe fear will save you. It will not. Riker folded his arms, expression unmoved. Fear's got nothing to do with it. Krogan's mandibles twitched. This is your last chance. Surrender, and I will grant your species mercy. The officers around Riker bristled, but he only smiled, cold and sharp. Funny, I was about to offer you the same deal. For the first time, silence stretched across the comm channel. Then Krogan snarled, and the transmission cut. The Warlords advanced. Earth's defenses opened fire first. A wall of missiles streaked toward the incoming ships, breaking apart into smaller, faster projectiles that wove through enemy countermeasures. Explosions flared in the darkness, hulls rupturing, but the Warlord fleet pressed on. Plasma cannons returned fire, turning orbital defense platforms into molten wreckage. On the ground, anti-air batteries spewed railgun slugs into the sky, striking down landing craft before they breached the atmosphere. But it wasn't enough. The Warlords were coming. Riker turned to Voss and Carter, both standing ready. We take the fight to them. With a nod, they sprinted to the hangar, where strike teams loaded onto fast assault craft. Their stolen dreadnought was already moving, slipping through the chaos, using the Warlord fleet's own formations against them. As the assault craft launched, Riker's team punched through the enemy's defensive net, weaving between the towering warships, heading straight for Krogan's flagship. Inside the massive vessel, alarms blared as Riker and his team stormed to the corridors, cutting down resistance with ruthless efficiency. They knew the layout, the weak points. This wasn't just a battle. It was an execution. They reached the war room, breaching through heavy blast doors. Krogan stood waiting, his elite guards at his side, weapons drawn. The Overlord's gaze locked onto Riker, and for the first time, there was no amusement, only raw, seething hatred. You should have died on my world, Krogan growled, stepping forward. The guards charged, and the room exploded into chaos. Voss met the first attacker head-on, his rifle barking fire, while Carter weaved between enemies, a blur of precision and death. Riker moved straight for Krogan, dodging a brutal swipe of razor-sharp claws. He struck back, his combat knife flashing, carving into the Warlord's plated hide. Krogan barely flinched. His massive hand closed around Riker's throat, lifting him off the ground with terrifying ease. You are nothing, Krogan hissed. Riker gritted his teeth, his vision darkening. But his hands remained steady as he pulled the last explosive charge from his belt and activated it. Neither are you. He slammed it against Krogan's chest. The blast sent them both hurtling back, the Overlord's armor cracking, molten fissures spreading across his torso. Riker hit the ground hard, gasping for breath. Krogan staggered, smoke rising from his wounds. He bared his fangs, refusing to fall. But Riker was already moving, drawing his pistol and firing. 3 shots, straight through the Overlord's skull. Krogan swayed, eyes wide with disbelief, then collapsed. Silence filled the chamber. Then Carter's voice, breathless. That was satisfying. Voss wiped blood from his face. We need to move. They fought their way back to the assault craft, blasting free from the flagship as Earth's forces pushed forward. The Warlord fleet, leaderless and shaken, faltered. Some ships turned to flee, others fired wildly, but Earth's forces pressed their advantage, striking with newfound ferocity. One by one, the Warlord vessels fell, their invincible armada reduced to burning wreckage. The invasion had become a massacre, but this time, It was not Earth that burned. As Riker's craft touched down, cheers erupted across the command center. Officers, soldiers, engineers. Everyone knew what happened. The Warlords had been broken. Carter clapped Riker on the shoulder. "I'll be honest. Didn't think we'd make it." Riker exhaled, staring at the war-torn sky. "Neither did they." Voss chuckled. "So what now?" Riker watched the last of the enemy fleet vanish into void, the first retreat in their history. He didn't smile. "Now we make sure they never come back."